This time I would like to say a few words about this magnificent book by Charles Dickens. I strongly recommend everyone who hasn't read it to do so. It's a wonderful book and very unique, even among Charles Dickens' books, because it's the most optimistic of his book and most optimistic among his books. Because he has, it was his first novel actually. He has completed it in 1836 actually, and this book was the topic was not chosen by Dickens himself. It was chosen by the journalists who also who have contacted him as also a young journalist in order to make an agreement that he will be providing every month or every week, I'm not sure, next parts of the adventures of some London club. There was a time, of course, in which the clubs, literary clubs and popular science clubs and so on, were very extremely popular in London, and so it was a very popular topic. So that's why they have decided for a young journalist to write about it. And he knew, of course, this topic from experience. So he has written this book, and it was his first novel, and it's much more optimistic than every other book, although he also had some small, because most of, when we think about Charles Dickens, we usually think about gloomy stories about human misfortunes, about the oppression of poor people, about the orphanages and the houses for orphans, foster parents, which are decidedly abusive towards their foster children, and stories like that. So very gloomy, heartbreaking stories. Like, for instance, we remember Charles Dickens when we think Charles Dickens. When I am thinking Charles Dickens, when I usually what comes to my mind is the scene in Oliver Twist, for instance, when Oliver Twist is sitting in the orphanage in a dining hall, and they are served with food, and he is the only kid in several years of this orphanage functioning that who was brave enough to ask for more food, that is. And the commentary, the line that is coming after this brave action by Oliver Twist is that this boy will hang one day. Yes, so they were predicting his very unfortunate end of his life, right? So the other thing is which is coming to my mind when I think Charles Dickens is, of course, the scene from David Copperfield when the children of the because there is at the beginning of the novel David Copperfield, we have also a misfortune, and it's also starting with his misfortune, and there is this whole history, this whole story of the mother of the family dying, and then the father also dying because of because he was heartbroken after his wife's passing. So the children are, of course, without any parents, and they are going to their uncle, and his uncle is supposed to look after them. And this uncle is rather unpleasant, very Dickensian figure, very unpleasant and so on. And he says, he asks, what happened with your father? And they say, they reply that he died heartbroken when their mother passed. And he said, it's impossible. No such thing can happen. Not really in real life. No such thing can happen. Then after your wife's passing, you die because you are heartbroken. And David Copperfield replies that yes, it can happen when you've got a heart. Yeah. So this is the usual topics that are coming to our minds when we are thinking about Charles Dickens, but not Pickwick Club. I was thinking that maybe I would present to this topic, to this particular idea, to this particular vlog. I would present, I thought, the English original version or something like this, but I thought that it would be, because later I will be summarizing the plot and summarizing my view of the book in Polish. So I will be presenting the exact same copy of the book. But I thought that maybe it would be interesting for an English-speaking audience to see the Polish version of the papers, Klub Pickwicka, yeah, the papers, the Pickwick Papers. The original title is the Pickwick Papers, but in Polish it's something like Pickwick's Club. Yeah, so Klub Pickwicka. So maybe it would be just more interesting because that we also here in Poland read Charles Dickens. Imagine that. Yes, we are. And for instance, what is very interesting about this book is that I never would think that Charles Dickens would be exactly as deep in thought and in presenting complicated human situations, human life situations, in an optimistic and comedic book, exactly as easy as he was presenting a tragic events in his more gloomy books. That is practically all the other books, maybe with the only other exception would be The Tale of Two Cities, but it's also about very serious stuff. It's not very gloomy, but it's about serious stuff. It's about the French Revolution and things like that. And by the way, Dickens was progressive, and he thought that the history of revolution is not really a story about cruelty. It's more like history what comes after the elites present themselves as too egoistic, and the mob is reacting, and the mob is to some extent entitled to react to this egoism of elites. So because Dickens was a progressive, as I mentioned. And in some of his gloomy books, Dickens was also finding some places in which the more progressive and more cordial human societies prosper. By the way, Dickens was by no means a socialist. It's sometimes in this Central Eastern Europe, when in those countries which were until recently, well, from historical perspective, we can say that they were until recently under the Soviet occupation. There is a tendency of presenting Charles Dickens as a socialist. He was by no means a socialist. He was only and merely concentrated on persuading people to behave more cordially towards one another. So because he was thinking that people are too severe towards one another. So it was more about psychology, about sociology, than about economy. Much more. He was not writing anything which had something more to do with economy. With the only exception was when he was writing about the family of Barnacles, which were the depiction of the egoistic, elitist, aristocratic family, which were giving out governors of remote islands under the British protectorate, and they were coming to meet the other elite exactly as egoistic. But it's something that we are getting away from the Pickwick Papers. So to sum up, Dickens was concentrated on human relations much more than other stuff, of course. And even in his later novels, which are almost all much more gloomy than this optimistic Pickwick Papers novel, he has found, and he presented the one group of people as something as that could be used as a contrast to the normal gloomy social conditions. They, of course, there were the actors. His father was an actor, and he was imprisoned for debts. He was in debt, and he was imprisoned for many years in I don't remember in which prison, in which of the London old prisons he was. A Marshalsea. I think he was imprisoned in Marshalsea, not in Newgate, not in Fleet. Yeah, in Marsh. I think so, but I'm not sure. So, so he was presenting the happy society of actors as something like often a contrast to the normal gloomy situation. But this is all about his gloomy, about his pessimistic stuff, about his pessimistic novels. This novel is very unique because it's very optimistic. And what is really, we have here the society of it wasn't a topic that he has chosen himself. It was like a task for him to write about, and it was a very popular topic, and he concentrated on the happy moments in human life, although the vicious people are also present in this book, in form, for instance, of one Mr. Jingle, who was a swindler, although when he was meeting Pickwick and his group, he was helping them, because when the plot starts, then we can see that Mr. Pickwick and his fellow companions, they are getting into the carriage, and they are going, and Mr. Pickwick is asking very inquisitive questions about the profession of I don't remember how it is, the people who is responsible for the coach, for the carriage, and for the horses. I don't remember the name, how it is in English, but the one who drives the carriage. And he is very much interested in his profession, and well, the other guy is taking it in a very wrong way, and he thinks that Mr. Pickwick is a spy of a government or something like this, and he and his friends wanted to beat up the Pickwick Club, the members of the Pickwick Club, but Mr. Jingle comes out of nowhere and helps them. But it's the only occasion in which he is helping them. Just after that, he is the swindler and the people unworthy of any trust, and so on. So they have many problems with him, and he was all the time pretending to be a gentleman. And what is interesting, Mr. Jingle is the unworthy, the negative person. He is an actor. Actors usually in later novels of Dickens are presented in a very positive light, and Mr. Jingle is just the opposite. So that's interesting. So the Pickwickites, I don't know, the Pickwickites, they are traveling around southern England, and they are meeting people who are running some literary clubs and other societies, and they are they are traveling because of the philosophical reasons, and so on, for philosophical reasons, and that's the main plot. And they are eating and drinking a lot of good stuff, and life without much problems. Yes, they are all gentlemen. They have something to put to mouth. They don't have much problems in their lives. The only problem is Mr. Jingle, who is pretending to be some high rank of officer, a captain of the British Army, and he's trying to get some old widow interested in him, and he's making similar things many times, and he is of course a very negative figure. So their quest is not only traveling for philosophical and geographical reasons, because the Pickwickites are writing about about various stuff. They are writing about geography. They are writing about ancient ruins. They are writing about human condition. They are writing about human professions, people's professions, and so on. So they are interested in almost everything. So it is also, to some extent, a parody of typical English, typical London club. But also they are portrayed in the same time as people, well, to some extent naive, but all in all, very positive people who are not accustomed to people who are wicked. So they are fooled several times before the whole story ends with the demise of Mr. Jingle and the triumph of the Pickwickites. The Pickwickites are the Mr. Snodgrass, who is a poet, Mr. Winkle, who is a sportsman, but also a little bit of a coward. But he is trying to be brave because he must be brave. For instance, when Mr. Jingle borrows without the knowledge of Mr. Winkle his coat he has proposed for the Pickwick Club as the mandatory blue coat of the Pickwickites for the future. And Mr. Jingle is borrowing this because he says he has no proper clothes for the ball. And he and Mr. Tupman, the other Pickwickite, Jingle is not the Pickwickite. The Pickwickites are only Snodgrass, Pickwick himself, of course, Winkle, and Tupman. Tupman is the lover of dances and balls, and they are going to the ball. And Tupman is really lending the coat, the blue coat of Winkle. Winkle is fall asleep because he was drinking last night, and he was drinking during night, and so without his knowledge, the blue coat is lent to Mr. Jingle, and Mr. Jingle is making his advances to the old elderly widow, which makes some army doctor mad, and he wants to challenge Mr. Jingle to a duel. But next morning, Mr. Jingle is nowhere to be found, and he is coming to Mr. Winkle because Mr. Winkle is he is the proprietor of the coat, so he is challenged to a duel. Mr. Winkle is uncertain what he should do, and he thinks, well, maybe I was drunk, maybe I was in the ball, maybe I was participating in the ball last night, maybe I was offending some widow, I don't really remember. So he goes to the duel, and of course everything is happily resolved. And the army doctor, of course, he from the start he sees that it's not the man he is supposed to be challenging to a duel. He sees that it's some other fellow. Instead of Mr. Jingle, he sees Mr. Winkle, and of course he thinks, why you came instead? You are not the guy. So he says, yeah, I know that I'm not the fellow, but you were suggesting that the guy in the blue coat of the Pickwick Club has done something improper, and I'm always prepared to defend the honor of the Pickwick Club. And of course, the army doctor is very much moved, and he congratulates him for this brave behavior, and they would be great friends had not the army doctor seen Mr. Jingle again and realized that they are a company with Mr. Jingle, unfortunately. And the problem is, and he cannot even challenge, when he sees Mr. Jingle again, he cannot even challenge him to a duel because Mr. Jingle is an actor. So actors are supposed to be without honor because they are playing different people every night. That was the traditional way of thinking about actors. So he cannot, and he's of course mad and so on. And Mr. Winkle is the only one at the beginning that believes that Mr. Jingle is not a person they should be staying in company of, but not because he's an actor and they are gentlemen. It's not a problem, but because he's well, a liar and a person, unworthy person, right? So, but several similar adventures happen before they all realize that Mr. Winkle was right. Mr. Winkle is very shy and, a little bit well, not a person that would persuade all the others instantly. So they are not believing. Yeah. So we see very many scenes of happy drinking and socializing and many funny adventures of Mr. Jingle as well as the Pickwickites, and these scenes are constructed in the way Charles Dickens. To say that Charles Dickens is the brilliant novelist, a brilliant writer, is to say nothing. He is like an architect. He is presenting you with these scenes. When he is presenting the scene to you, then you are recognizing first only the small elements of the scene, the things without relevance, and then somewhere you have the small hints how the scene will be going, how the story will be developing. And this is ingenious stuff. This is something that is, well, like no any other writer, really. So very much I strongly recommend this book, and even more than the gloomy books, the pessimistic books of Charles Dickens. If you hadn't read this, well, I strongly recommend. Yes. So okay. So in a while, I will be also explaining all this more or less, if I remember all this, in Polish. I think I said what I wanted to say. I hope so. Yes. So very good book. Not just good book. Brilliant book. Brilliant book. No, I haven't checked my email box yet for a couple of hours. Please to hear it or to read it, really. Rarely. Yeah. Good. So next time in Polish, why not, right? It will be probably a little bit shorter because, after all, Polish is my mother tongue, so it would be simpler.